Burden or benefit? The IMF says integrating refugees could help spur economic growth in Germany. How can Europe's new arrivals help counter the effects of an aging population? And what needs to be done to encourage greater job participation? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the program. I'm Fauziah Ibrahim. Now, when Chancellor Angela Merkel opened Germany up to Syrian refugees, it seemed to reflect a belief that it was a moral imperative, regardless of the cost. But the cost matters because it shapes the way citizens in Germany and elsewhere view the hundreds of thousands of refugees who've now settled across Europe. Some Germans fear the new arrivals will take their jobs and push down wages. Others think that they're a burden on taxpayers. However, the International Monetary Fund thinks they could represent an economic opportunity, and it's calling on Germany to do more to help the refugees find jobs. Now, Germany has one of the fastest aging populations in Europe, while at least half of the refugees who arrived in 2015 were under the age of 25. Many of them are well educated. 21% of Syrians who arrived in Germany since 2013 have post-secondary education, and that is close to the German average of 23%. But tough labour laws in the European Union means it could take a while to integrate them into the economy. And many refugee job seekers will need extensive training and, more importantly, learn to speak German. Now, before we bring in our guests, Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane sets things up from Berlin.
This is the Arrivo foundry in central Berlin, a place for refugees to come to learn new skills and take language courses. It's just one among many initiatives that have sprung up in Germany in recent times. Schemes the IMF believes could help to address key shortages of skilled workers. The IMF wants to see a broader participation of refugees in the marketplace. It says employers should recognise the informal skills refugees bring. And it urges the government and employers to facilitate more flexible vocational training. Behind all this is Germany's growing demographic headache. In towns and cities across the country, a declining birth rate and an ever-increasing pensioner population means there are fewer skilled workers. But do Germans agree that integrating more skilled refugee workers would benefit their country?
Refugees should have a stake in society.
They're here and we have to help them, not sideline them.
The problem for the IMF is that employers here insist on a level of competence in German that many refugees simply do not have. Also, many no longer have access to copies of their academic qualifications, so cannot prove they are qualified for the jobs they want.
In an effort to ease problems like this, ministers are looking at changing the law regarding how refugees integrate into society. Angela Merkel's cabinet is due to meet in the coming weeks to agree on the next step. But the opposition in Parliament says the coalition government's policies do not go far enough.
In reality, the institutions and structures must be opened up and bureaucratic hurdles lowered. And then you have to arrive at a position where the refugees aren't seen as special cases in the workforce or education system, but one group amongst many for whom we have to open up the labour market.
Angela Merkel has always said Germans and refugees need to work together to achieve integration. Now it seems the IMF thinks so too, and the long-term benefits could be substantial. Dominic Kane, Al Jazeera, Berlin.
So let's now get the thoughts of our guests. And joining us from Paris is Thomas Liebig, Senior Migration Specialist at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, otherwise known as the OECD, in Berlin. Franziska Hartmann, project coordinator for Arrivo. That's an initiative creating the conditions for migrants to stay in Europe and earn a living. If I could start with you first, Ms. Hartmann. As we've seen from Dominic's story, many of these refugees are arriving on European shores without papers, without qualifications, without references, and even without a standard knowledge of language as well as national skills. Now, which may not be up to par with national standards. How do you make such a person employable and attractive to employers?
We have a project just invented for that case, if you want. And Arrivo, the project that we do here based in Berlin, is kind of like invented for 50 people. So it's just a best practice model to find out actually how that would work. And we are having two parts in this project. We have one part where we invite the people to come and join our project, and we do workshops with them. We do lots of communication. We help them figuring out organizing their lives here, but also like go and visit special workshops for the language, also for their crafts abilities, or also to learn some basic craft knowledge or cultural knowledge of Germany or German labor market. And we cooperate with several other institutions to do workshops. So we have a whole range of workshops to kind of do that teaching or training to prepare people to be able to enter the work market. And then in the second part, but maybe I tell that later, we actually work with companies and send them there for internships.
Right, well, talk to us about these companies and internships. How receptive are they to take on someone who may not be able to speak German as well, someone whose skills may not be as good as their other employees?
Well, first of all, it is maybe important to mention that we have certain conditions for people to enter our project. And one condition is that they have to be able to speak some basic German. Like, they have to have a basic level of German knowledge. So usually, I don't know if you know the European reference system, but it would be B1, the level of German that we demand to enter the project. So it's not that they don't speak German at all. And the companies, we work with a network of about 200 companies, and they came to us, like we had a sort of a campaign, and the companies came to join us in the network. So I think they have this, let's say they have this motivation also to find some person that has a refugee context to work in their company, so they know what they're doing or they know what they're part of. And yes, in the end, the companies are very eager to do internships to get to know the people, because the contact is the first thing you need to just get a feeling of what that person might bring to your company or might be able to do. And yes, like I said, the people usually they have a basic German knowledge, and then they are able to do internships there, and then the company and the person, they figure out if they are fitting to each other or not.
Well, as they grow in skills as well as language skills and their employability, Mr. Liebig, if I can bring you in here, it's been a long time theme for those who are opposed to the migration policies, that these are the same people who will take away jobs from Germans, from European Union citizens, that they will depress wages, that they will raise taxes to fund social welfare programs. Are you seeing evidence of this?
Well, we have looked at the labor market impact of the refugee crisis on the European economy. And by and large, first of all, it's important to say that it takes quite a lot of time until there's a measurable, significant impact that's building up, precisely because many refugees initially struggle to find employment. So there's not much competition initially. Also, we must acknowledge that many, obviously, of these people are filling gaps in the labor market once they have acquired the necessary skills, which takes some time. And clearly, there's an upfront investment to be made. But these people are eager to work, and they're also very resourceful persons. So if countries invest upfront into their integration, then this can be an asset in the long term.
You say the long term. How long are we saying? Because we're talking about the fact that these refugees, in the short term at least, could be a burden to fiscal spending. They could be raising taxes. They could be depressing wages as well. So how long is long term?
Well, it takes on average, on average refugees in the past in European OECD countries 5 to 6 years until the majority is in employment. So that's about the time span which we generally which it may take. Obviously, good integration policies can speed up that process, and good economic conditions will also help to integrate them quicker. And also, there's a differentiation to be made between the better skilled and the higher educated, who are more ready for the labor market and who can more quickly learn the language and find a job. But there's also a fair amount of refugees coming who lack basic skills. And for these people, we must be very clear also, it is a pretty long pathway until they are really employable. So that will take several years, and it can take actually up to 10 years in some cases, because when they lack basic skills, these must first be built up, because it would be an error to focus for these groups too much on early labor market integration, because the jobs that they would get would not be sustainable in the long run.
Ms. Hartmann, if I can bring you into the discussion here, and I want to talk about people which you brought up at some point too, people who lack basic skills, shall we say. These are the people who are not as employable as others may be. I did read about a particular case of a sheep herder who had sought asylum. Now, what do you do with a 50-year-old sheep herder who's come to seek asylum, who needs to support himself and the family? Where does he go?
So we would, for that person, try to find, in that age probably, jobs that helps the person maybe to live an independent life financially, and also like to, I think, like as we all know, work has a lot to do with integration, and also with like how you feel in a society, and work is an important part of that. So even though that might just be a job for a person that is already 50 years old, I think you said, that would in my eyes totally help the person to slowly be integrated in this society. But this is not the people we work with in the first place.
Well, let me then throw the question to Mr. Liebig. What happens then with the person who doesn't have basic skills, who doesn't have the basic language skills as well? Where do they fit in? How do they become employable?
As I said in my earlier statement, it requires a significant upfront investment, and it will take a couple of years for that person to build up those skills. But it's an investment that will pay off not only for the migrants themselves, but perhaps even more importantly when they have children, because we know that the best thing for good results for the children is when you invest it also into the integration of their parents.
Now let's take a closer look at how the new arrivals are expected to benefit the European Union. Now, in January, the IMF predicted that the influx of refugees could result in a modest increase in economic growth in some parts of Europe. The IMF said that Germany, Austria and Sweden, home to most refugees, will see the biggest economic impact. Of the three, the IMF estimated that Austria would see the highest growth. Now, its GDP is predicted to rise by 0.5% next year. Sweden is a fraction lower, and Germany is 1/3 of 1%. Mr. Liebig, these are figures that are coming from established EU economies. What about those who are not thriving, who don't enjoy as good an economy as those? Countries like Hungary, the Czech Republic and Romania as well. They all say that embracing the refugee influx would be a real strain to their fiscal spending.
I think we must differentiate here. First of all, a lot of these countries which you have mentioned, a lot of the Central and Eastern European countries have actually quite low numbers of refugees who are staying. Second, many of these
well, exactly.
countries
that is my
face
point.
quite
There is a point of
aging challenges.
there is a real point of tension, isn't it, within the EU members itself? These are the countries that are being pressed to take in more refugees, but they say we can't afford them. They're too much of an economic burden.
Well, we must acknowledge that these countries have very little experience in dealing with the issue. The reception infrastructure is often not in place, so these countries must also be supported to be able to build up that infrastructure and then to take when they take in the refugees. And it will also be beneficial for those countries, precisely for some of those countries, because they are facing very severe aging challenges, which are among the strongest among all OECD countries, to invest into the integration of refugees. Because if these acquire the necessary skill, they can build on tomorrow's workforce with them, which will be very essential for many countries in Europe.
Ms. Hartmann, EU labour laws tend to prioritise citizens as well as nationals as well. I mean, that is the case in Germany, definitely. Would you like to see these labour laws relaxed a little bit more so that more refugees, more asylum seekers are able to be more employable?
Yeah, I would like to see that, or let me say that from the perspective of our project, it would be very helpful if these sort of rules would be more relaxed, like you said, because just simply it would not block this integrational process, because in many cases this is what our problem is very often when we work, is there is laws that make possible that people work, and this is wanted, so like there's a possibility for refugees to get into work, but then there is a lot of these sort of rules that make it complicated for many of them in the end, and this is very bureaucratic, and our project has to spend or put a lot of time and energy in this bureaucratic rules, or the solution of them.
Okay, well, let me take it now from the employer's point of view. What is the point of training someone, a refugee, a new arrival, a new migrant? What is the point of training this person when I'm not sure that this person is going to stay in the country?
First of all, there is in many organizations of economical organizations, I heard the opinion that also this would be a very good thing to train them, even though because they might go home one day and they can take that skills to their home countries and also help to build them up. I don't know if this is the reality for lots of people, that they're actually really able to go home so soon, but in any case, I think it is, we all not knowing where this is going to end, or how long these people are going to stay here. There is no real answer on these questions, and it is just very useful to not force people to do nothing within 5 years that they're waiting for their asylum decision, so it's very useful to start something, and then maybe also to build a bridge of integration that makes them having a chance or an option to stay because they have been integrated in this society.
Well, I'm happy to say we can now bring in our third guest who joins us in Tallinn. Florian Hartleb is a political scientist and lecturer at the Eichstantt University. Thank you for being with us. Mr. Hartleb, the IMF's report on the economic potential of these refugees and these new migrants, mainly based on past migration trends. Now, as we know, economies, particularly current economies, are unpredictable. It depends on how many more refugees will be arriving in the EU, how quickly their asylum processes can be processed, shall we say, and how quickly they can find a job. So how can we be sure that these new arrivals will actually be a wonderful human potential or capital for the economies in the European Union?
We had in Germany the hope in the last autumn, the so-called welcome culture, to integrate the more than 1 million refugees to the German economic market. But as we know right now is that they don't have the skill, and it takes a lot of effort, less bureaucracy, and also more quick registration. And then maybe it's possible that there can be the skilled workers, not from today, not from tomorrow, but maybe for the day after tomorrow.
Now, many of the countries who have been able to embrace the refugees with relative success, and I'm talking like countries like the UK, France, Germany as well. Now, these are the countries have a historic migration experience. We were talking a little earlier on about other countries who do not have the same sort of historic migration experience. We're talking about the Czech Republic, Hungary, even Denmark. How much is their reception towards refugees and new arrivals, how much is that tied to the fact that they really don't have experience in terms of this mass migration?
The problem is basically that these countries, indeed, they don't have the experience what we had in Germany already in the 60s with the so-called Gastarbeiter, the guest workers. And now we have the big problem also that especially the Central European countries, but also what the right-wing populists and radicals are pushing forward is the fear of Islam. And the question is also, if it's clash of culture, what Samuel Huntington described, or is it so easy to integrate people from other cultures?
Mr. Liebig, Mr. Hartleb raised a very important point there, and that is the fact that the politics of Europe tends to be leaning towards the right at the moment, particularly as more and more refugees reach Europe. How do you see this leaning towards the right in the future affecting the policies, economic policies, in relation to these new arrivals?
Clearly, public opinion is a crucial issue in the European context. And so it's very important to bring out the facts into the public domain, that people are arriving for seeking refuge on humanitarian grounds, and they should be admitted on humanitarian considerations, not on economic considerations primarily. That these people want to integrate, that these people want to work, and that they're generally not a burden on the welfare state. We have looked into this issue at the OECD by looking at the fiscal impact of migration and seeing that on average across OECD countries, the fiscal impact of migration is neutral to slightly positive. And that migrants do not take up more benefits, more social benefits, for example, than the native-born. These kind of facts are very crucial for better informing the public debate and for avoiding that extremist fears dominate the debate, because these often focus on extreme cases, but they're not representative of the whole refugee or even migrant population.
Ms. Hartmann, if I could give you the last say, we're just running out of time here. You speak to the people who are integrating, who face the challenges of integration. You work with them very closely. What are they saying to you about their experiences, about trying to integrate?
We have very good experiences in that way. All the companies that we work with and that integrated refugees in their companies, like informal vocational trainings or internships, or jobs, it worked out very fine usually. Like the moment that there is a contact in form of an internship, very often afterwards there is going to be a job or a vocational training resulting out from that. And that has to do with the fact that we prepare these internships very well. So we try to give the people, or like the refugees, the participants, every what we think, what we can do, teach them in form of workshops what they need to know to be prepared to enter these job markets, and then the contact with the company. It very often it leads to even some family-like structures that, like, the companies, they like the person that is arriving in their company, and they try to help, and they try to do whatever they can do, and they try to understand a lot of things, and that is usually, like, from our point of view, a very nice development going on there. And this contact helps a lot, because if we, very often when we talk about refugees in the media or in several events, it stays very abstract, but you can totally tell that if from the moment that a person is in the company, there's something happening. Like, in the end, it's like people meeting, it's like, right, there's one person meeting another person, and very often You know, this is like there can be differences, but you try to work them out. And as long as a person is motivated and wants to work, this is a total benefit for this company. And yeah, this is why I think the results finally in our job or vocational training solutions is very good. Yeah.
And on that positive note, we're going to have to end the discussion. I'd like to thank all our guests, Thomas Liebig, Franziska Hartmann and Florian Hartleb. And thank you too for watching. You can always watch the program again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can always join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Fauziah Ibrahim, and the whole team, thanks for watching.